I promise I won't say this very often, but this video, it's a little bit political. Don't go running away. Honestly, it's not what you think. I'm talking about the Six Nations, which is only days away, and a discussion has been had by the politicians at the highest levels about where and how we should be able to, or not, watch this event, this amazing event, which I cannot wait for. Lots to discuss. Tell me what you think in the comments down below as I go through it. Also, if you're from another country outside of the UK, how is the broadcast of your national team's matches through the season organised? Is it all pay TV? Is there some free to air? I'm not actually sure exactly what the situation is. So yeah, let me know that as well. But basically the way it works in the UK, quick refresher if you're not aware, is there are so-called crown jewels, certain sporting events which due to their cultural significance have to be on free to air TV, and they include the Football World Cup, the European Football Championships, the Olympics, summer and winter. Wimbledon is on the list as well, isn't it? Yeah, the FA Cup final is, the Rugby League Challenge Cup final, the Grand National, the Epsom Derby, and the one event which is there on the list from Rugby Union is the Rugby World Cup final. That is on the list, not the Rugby World Cup, just the final. Now, there was an attempt made to move the Six Nations onto that list as well. It's currently on the next tier down, where it can go on behind a paywall, but you have to show highlights or a delayed broadcast on free-to-air TV. That's where the Six Nations and the Rugby World Cup currently sit. And the deal to broadcast the Six Nations comes to an end after next year's competition. Currently, it's broadcast on BBC and ITV on free-to-air TV. Now, some politicians raised this, trying to move it up to the crown jewels, and they've been told basically, no, we're not interested in that. And the reaction to this, I will say, has quite a lot been that this is a nightmare scenario for rugby. And I just think we need to temper that a little bit, because in a funny way, this news today is no news whatsoever. All it means is a law which doesn't exist and has never existed is going to continue not existing. And also, I think a reason why maybe the reaction's a bit overly negative at this point is because I think there's a really good argument to make that it will stay on free-to-air TV as much as anything, because rugby is wildly popular in the UK. International rugby is wildly popular. The World Cup did gangbusters figures for ITV. They loved it. 9 million people tuned into that Rugby World Cup semi-final, England v South Africa. And I will also add to that, the sponsors and advertisers that rugby attracts, serious dough. Like, it's the watch companies and the premium car companies. And I'll put it this way, England have an official champagne partner. Let that sink in. Bollinger, if you're interested. Amazing, isn't it? So there's a lot of money in rugby, and that is why I think ITV will still be bidding for it. I think the BBC will still be interested as well. By the way, I think it's important to point out the BBC is not free to air. You have to pay £159 for a licence fee. I'm not complaining about that. I'm just stating facts. You pay more for that than you would for Amazon. And my house sometimes, especially around Christmas, looks like an Amazon depot with the amount of parcels that are getting delivered. But yeah, I can imagine a situation where you'll have Amazon maybe trying to get the Six Nations, maybe Netflix trying to get the Six Nations, I don't know. And also the BBC and ITV making a bid. And then it's down to the countries to decide what's best for the sport. And is it best for the sport to take maybe a bit more money or take a bit less money, but guarantee the audience? And I think there's a good argument to say that second one might be what happens. But if the worst does happen, or what you perceive to be the worst happens, and it goes behind a paywall, is that a disaster for rugby? That's the question. I think the first thing to point out is that habits are changing massively. They already have, and imagine how much more they're going to change in the years ahead. So does this really matter as much as maybe we think it does? I mean, thank goodness habits are changing, because, you know, there's loads of people watching YouTube trying to find their rugby coverage, and good for me that is the case. I love it, and thank you very much. And by the way, if you get value from the videos on the channel, please hit subscribe. Give the video a thumbs up as well, because I don't have a big marketing budget. It is just me, and the thumbs up really helps me spread the word. So I'd love it. And this is the way the world is going. People have like, oh yeah, I'll pay my gas and electric bill, pay my mortgage, and I'll pay my Netflix and my Spotify and whatever, Prime Video. That's just kind of the way the world is. And so think how it's going to be in another 10 years. the young audience that rugby is so worried that it won't be able to get interested in the sport, are they really going to be watching free-to-air TV, or is everything moving towards a subscription model type of thing? I don't know. It's just an interesting one to think about, isn't it? But as we move forward, a good example that people have used to say, you know, beware the warning of cricket, I think it's a really, really good comparison to make, because rugby and cricket are played in similar countries. They've got similar levels of participation and viewership. And cricket has already gone for quite a few years now behind a paywall, certainly in the UK. And the Ashes was last year in the summer. And Sky Sports have been saying, well, we got amazing viewers for the Ashes, and they did. They broke some records. It was like 2.5 million were viewing it, watching at any one time. And that is a great number. It's also probably about a third of the number that it would have been back in the day when it was on the BBC or Channel 4. So the audience is massively lower than it would have been otherwise. It is a big number on a pay TV channel, don't get me wrong, but it's smaller than it would have been in the past. And the fear is when that audience isn't there, that has a knock-on effect on the money the sport generates and the participation levels in the sport. So what's happened in cricket? Well, in cricket, I've got the data here for the last 10 years, and over the last 10 years, the sport is making way more cash. So that's the money part of it. I don't think it will lead to less money being made. The participation, I think that's a genuine, realistic concern. The participation in cricket, you've got to remember there's the COVID years in the middle here. So generally, when you just take it, and the only data I've got is from 6-7 years, is it stayed pretty much flat in terms of participation. And given we had the whole COVID years, I think that's a bit of a result for cricket. And maybe this should just temper some of the fears of, you know, the backside falling out of rugby if it goes off pay-to-air TV during the Six Nations. It might not be the nightmare scenario that people fear. In terms of rugby, the participation, we hear about this all the time, is up globally, and certainly in terms of women's sport, up massively. I coach at my local university, and they've got a women's team now that are doing great, and they've never had that, you know, years ago. My local rugby club's got a women's team that never had girls' teams coming through as well. So rugby participation in that sense is going up brilliantly, and it's reaching new territories all the time. That is all fantastic. What's the picture though in English lower league rugby, in club rugby, in the men's game and the children's sport? I think we all know that. If you're involved in it, you know it's not in a great place, and it hasn't been for a while. There used to be 5 teams that my local rugby club put out on a Saturday afternoon. Now it's 3. There's lots of lower leagues with walkovers happening regularly because one team can't put a side out. So there's an issue with participation. When you look at children's participation, it's even worse. It's really, really not good. And this, let me just remind you, these fears about participation, what if it goes off free-to-air TV? Participation is going to drop. Participation is already dropping. Why? Just on domestic rugby generally, actually, one of the biggest learns I've made from the first year on this channel, on Egg Chasers, is that there just is not the appetite for domestic rugby, certainly in England. When I put videos up on the Gallagher Premiership, I get next to no views. International rugby, lapping it up. I've been delighted actually how well and how much interest there seems to be in the Champions Cup. That's fantastic, because that shows an appetite for those club teams. But in terms of the domestic rugby product that there is in England, there's not that much interest whatsoever. And I've played rugby with guys, and so they're into rugby, they love rugby. They never ever watch a Premiership game, but they watch every England match, and it's a massive occasion and a big event. And do you know what? I'm not complaining. I think that's okay. But like I say, that is reflected in the content that I make on Egg Chasers. If you want more Premiership or Super Rugby or that kind of thing, if you want more of that, let me know and then watch it. And when I do put the videos up, watch it, share it, tell people about it. And that's the only way that will happen. But what it says to me is there just isn't the interest in it. But there is massive interest in international rugby. It is the World Cup, just across country after country, we're all saying the same thing. Record viewing figures during the Rugby World Cup. And I think that is kind of how it is, and I think that is okay. Sorry, I'll come back to that in a minute. I think that is okay, but I think that is basically the situation. International rugby is doing brilliantly. Local and domestic rugby, not so good. And there doesn't necessarily need to be a relationship between the two, because we've already got rugby on free-to-air TV and all of the negative things are happening. So why are the negative things happening? Well, I think actually the way rugby markets itself is not very good. I've mentioned this before on videos. I won't labour it too much, but just when you open up a newspaper, listen to the radio, put on the TV, even when you put on the very people that are broadcasting the sport, you just get bombarded with messages about rugby being sexist and racist and dangerous, and scrums being boring, and there's a toxic masculinity drinking culture. These are the things that you see all the time. And like you can even tune in to the Champions Cup or the Premiership. I will watch those, and I'll regularly hear the commentators moaning about scrums, moaning about kicking. If they don't love the sport, why would you expect anybody else to? And I just think rugby needs to give its head a wobble and start realising a few home truths. Tell people why the sport's great. Tell them why they love it. Is rugby dangerous? Yeah. But the data's in. The issues with head contact and concussions at lower levels, non-elite levels, it's not any more dangerous relatively than any other sport. And it's got so many positives. And well, for one thing, the risk is part of the reward. That's part of the reason why you play rugby. It's because you enjoy the risk and the challenge. But the teamwork, the discipline, the outlet for aggression, all these positives which could help so many people. Why can't rugby pipe up and start talking about those things? I talk about them here on this channel, and I will continue to do so because I love the sport. I know why people play it. And do you know what that is? I know the people that love rugby, and I want to look after the people that love rugby and not try and find, and this is where I think TV is getting itself into a bit of a trouble with all the talk about broadcasting and stuff. We're trying to reach some mythical audience of rugby people that might become rugby players who don't really exist. First and foremost, look after the people that already play, watch, purchase tickets for, buy the shirts of clubs for the sport already, and then we build out from there. And I think that's the way. I've gone on a little bit of a rant there. Didn't mean to. If you disagree wildly, let me know. Tell me what you think. But when it comes to the Six Nations, I think it's going to be fine wherever it's broadcast. I would like it to stay on free-to-air TV. But even if it doesn't, it's going to be fine. It's massively popular. The pubs are always going to be rammed around the UK and Ireland. They're going to be absolutely rammed on a Saturday afternoon every February and March while the Six Nations is on, because they always have. And they always will. And yeah, there we go. That's my thoughts. I'll leave it on that nice, hopefully positive end. And let me know what you think. I'll see you on the next video. Six Nations is not far away.